I was on a weekend getaway with my family on February 17, 2000. The patch of ice on the roadway caused our automobile to flip over multiple times. At some point, we came to a halt and discovered that we were lying on our backs in the middle of the highway, on the grass median. The first incident did not result in injuries, but it did turn the car upside down and total it. After checking in, we learned that everyone was fine, even though my mom was stuck behind the wheel. Dangling upside down in the back seat, I was on the passenger side. In my memory, I slammed myself against the back glass on the driver's side after releasing my seatbelt. Being on the glass floor felt weird. Squirmed my way past the jumbled contents of the Chevy Tahoe's back seat and squeezed through one of the shattered glass in the vehicle's two rear doors. As I ducked my head through the door, I could hear the shatter of glass beneath my feet. That was my last memory. On the same piece of ice, another motorist lost control of their vehicle while we were headed in the opposite direction. But this vehicle merely swayed from side to side rather than rolling. After that, it made its way to the middle median, got back on its wheels, and crashed into my brother and me as we climbed out of the car. The vehicle my parents were riding in was subsequently involved in the collision. Out of everyone who lost consciousness, I was the only one. Neither the appearance of the world following the crash nor my ability to exit the vehicle are recollected. When I crawled out the window, all I can remember is that I was crawling and not remembering anything else. As my imagination goes further, I picture myself squirming down a dimly lit corridor, with the damaged back windows of the car serving as a portal to a more luminous outer world. Because it is so glaringly bright, I must shut my eyes. Unlike when you stare directly at the sun, I do not experience heat. I have to shut my eyes and tilt my head ever so slightly because the brightness is blinding. After closing my eyes again, I find myself in a room. Due to the intense brightness of the light, my exact location is not immediately apparent. Now that I'm able to concentrate, I notice what appears to be an endless emptiness at the room's edge rather than any walls at all. Even though I can't see it, I know I'm in this room with an edge. The claustrophobia of it is palpable. The sensation is more of an edge than a tightness. It's almost like being in a glass room. Sitting at a desk, I couldn't quite place my finger on whether or not I can see through the transparent glass on top. A guy is sitting across from me. Although I am unable to visualize his features, he is a middle-aged man donning a crisp white suit. All things are white. Apart from the fact that he was neatly groomed, I don't recall his hairstyle. I feel at peace here. I am not sad or afraid. To some extent, it resembles a cozy blanket that I can wrap around myself. Across from me, a man is talking. As I retell the story in my mind, his voice is completely absent. "I was in an accident," he replied, "but it wasn't my time yet. I had to accomplish something essential," he added, "and I would know when it was time to return." Suddenly, deafening roar accompanied by deafening decibels resounded across the air. Then, the sound of voices began to fade in, followed by the beeping of the medical machines. My speed was high as I descended. I re-entered my physical form after floating through space and time on the operating table. Night fell. I felt every emotion again, and others were chatting with me. I felt an unbearable agony when I closed my eyes. I was physically and mentally exhausted. I was now conversing with a nurse as the words became crystal clear. Something about the wedding of Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia came up in her Star Wars question to me. "What are you talking about?" asked her as I was nearly taken aback by this. True siblings, they are. When I opened my eyes, I noticed that there was someone on the bed beside me. A man was clearly visible to me. I extended my hand and shouted out to my brother, but he remained fixed ahead, unmoved. And then I blacked out. Once again, I regained consciousness, but this time I found myself in a hospital room, completely dim and unable to communicate. Merely moaned and whispered to get some water. Aside from a tiny noise, my attempts to speak were unsuccessful. As soon as the guy next to me summoned a nurse, a swarm of people descended upon the scene. I was sitting up in bed with a bunch of people surrounding me when I started throwing up blood uncontrollably. Once again, I blacked out. When I regained consciousness, my internal memories and sense of time perception returned to normal. There was a guy in the room with me who made a frog sound. In my opinion, he smoked. It was the hospital's intensive care unit. His name was Mike, and he sang cowboy music. He returned with his cowboy hat, gloves, and a card featuring his cartoon. Inscribed inside was the following: "Ride this one out. A good bull won't hurt you." Not only have I lost track of him, but I also don't recall ever seeing him again. Finding people online is something I'm rather excellent at. I was almost there, but I can't be sure without running a search of police records, which I don't have access to. I long to return to that town in search of him. So ends the first encounter. We now move on to our second encounter. I was familiar with this feeling, and I had previously managed to avoid passing out during similar situations. Even though I was aware of the symptoms, no one ever diagnosed my concussions or panic episodes. I rolled out of bed to fetch water late one night. After making it a little distance down the corridor, I began to lose control of my awareness. I had the identical first sensations right before I passed out. The room was closing in on me. My vision was tunneling. My breathing got short. I was lightheaded, and I saw white dots. On this occasion, I was powerless to prevent it. There was absolutely nothing in the corridor that I could cling on, so I was certain that I would fall. As I leaned on the wall, I tripped and collapsed, maybe suffocating myself. Although I can't say for sure, I'm leaning toward that being the case because of where I was lying when I regained consciousness, and the sudden, clear blast of air that followed. I felt like I was floating above my physical body as I blacked out. That happened to me once previously after a serious concussion. I put myself in a third-person perspective during that event. As I looked around, I found myself sprawled on the ground, clothing tossed about, and sounds emanating from all directions. I prefer the word perspective than vision, since I feel awkward saying it. It seemed as though I were seeing myself in a bird's eye view during that event. The source of the sounds I perceived was identical to the ones I would have encountered if I had been inside my own body. Oh, and by the way, I was skiing when I mentioned those clothes. They were more like gear. The garments were precisely where they had been while I had been observing myself from on high. Just as when I had that huge concussion all those years ago, I felt like I had left my body. Immateriality and the fact that I was yet fully human were immediately apparent to me. For some reason, I didn't challenge the logic behind this. It was terrifying initially. Suddenly, I felt a sense of serenity and curiosity about what came next. I wanted to know why I was doing this and where I was going. Am I lost? Nearly immediately, all of this was processed. After that, I got a strong sensation of actually traveling. Black hole, unfathomable by human eyes, stretched out before them, seemingly unending and unfathomable. It was enormous, foreboding, terrifying, and gorgeous all at once. To the void, I felt both drownness and fear. To my mind, it seemed like I was entering a parallel universe. In an instant, the sensation of movement ceased. I had an epiphany or a revelation right then. Asking, where am I going to end up, allowed me to have a conversation with myself. You can let me go if I want, but I'll never see my son again if I go. I snapped back to awareness. It felt like a massive force was pulling me back into my physical body. I felt what seemed like pressure being applied to my body, but suddenly I was back in my normal body in no time. Inhalation of air was rapid. I leaped to my feet from my deeply slushed position between the wall and the floor. My anxiety subsided, so I took a seat, drank some water, and promptly retired to bed. My heart raced until I could get my mental and cardiac health checked out. I thought about it constantly for weeks. Nothing was wrong, and the reason I blacked out remained a mystery. I take good care of myself physically and mentally. There has been no scientific justification put forth. I have been afraid to tell anyone or even bring it up in therapy because nothing has helped me feel better about anything. The events of the day have come to a close. I am really anticipating your thoughts in the comments section as usual. Be blessed and remain safe until we meet again.